And if you have even regulations making it impossible for all those people to do bad things, it's going to take a little less frequent to have a crisis, but it still will happen.
So that's why we get back to this idea of a design science approach,
Exactly.
that there's an underlying design flaw in how the system is organized.
Exactly. At the Stone Age, you know, we had a stone, right? And you killed an animal, right? And then you skinned it, and then you ate it, and then you cleaned your nails with the same stone, right? That was your tool, right? I would say we're still in the mindset of a Stone Age in terms of money. Money as a tool set, compared to a hammer, hammers are fantastic if you're dealing with nails. Pretty stupid to deal with a hammer for, say, a paint job or for screws. And that's what we do. And of course, in the money domain, a conventional money has all young features. It's issued by a center. It's scarce. You have positive interest rate with concentrate, which is young. It has competition as a result. People compete for money, and it's actually set up for that purpose.
Because of the artificial scarcity.
Because of the artificial scarcity, and also the way, well, it's getting more sophisticated. There's actually a deeper, interesting mechanism behind it that most people are not aware of, why it happened. I can give you an example of that, but let me first deal with the two things, otherwise. So all these features are of a young nature. Now, the Furiakipu, it's not scarce, it doesn't have interest, it's created by the people at the base, it's the yin currency. And it creates different behavior patterns. It's one of cooperation rather than competition. The Great Mother has had a bad time under Indo-European invasions and under monotheistic male god with a big beard hidden in the sky. All these things are, you know, pretty patriarchal. So it has been repressed. So what happens to the Great Mother today in our society? Well, she manifests in the form of her shadows. And those two shadows are greed, the excess shadow, the young shadow of the Great Mother archetype, repressed one. And the other side is fear of scarcity, fear of loss. You will recognize, it's a cliche, and it's true not only in Wall Street, the cliche in Wall Street is that there are only two emotions that the street knows: greed and fear. Fear of what? Fear of loss, fear of scarcity. In other words, if everybody had enough money, it would be worthless. So, you know, it's built in. And the fact that you have interest attached to money, the only reason that banks create money is because there's interest attached to it. Otherwise, why would they bother, right? So, in other words, it's built in. Well, interest is a way of actually, if you want to have some security in life, you need to accumulate money. And you live from the interest, right? So, we're talking the greed process. Okay? One of the statements was asked by Rockefeller, the founder of the dynasty, the first one, was asked, how much money do you need? And he says, a little more. If you go back to the film 2001, the Kubrick movie, wasn't it amazing that their view of the future of computing was a giant computer hall who would know it all? That's not what happened. We're dealing with a net, where you have millions of computers, all relatively small compared to HAL, that are actually interconnected. It's a yin process. Right. We see the breakdowns occurring that will force us to invent a new society. And I think it's an extraordinarily exciting place. We now have tools, including the computer tools, including the money concepts, which is basically the motivation tool that everybody human, you know, once the Chinese, even the communist Chinese, have gone over to motivating their population through money, we're dealing with a global process, right? So changing the money concept, you can actually create totally different behaviors. And that is what's going to be necessary if we want to address all the challenges that we have, and certainly plenty of challenges to address with. It's not the credit crisis that can lead to starvation. Gandhi made the point that there's enough of everything for everybody's needs. There is not enough for everybody's greed.
I see.
In fact, my view is that the money, any money, is always the projection of the collective unconscious of a society. Every society always has considered its own money system self-evident, whether they were feathers, stones, pieces of metal, or pieces of paper, or electronic bits. All will consider them obvious. That means, translation, they're unconscious. There was a cartoon, I believe it was in the New Yorker, where you had a Mayan guy sculpting a big stone, you know, and you had the big chief with all his feathers coming by. What are you doing there? You know, why are you stopping in 2012? He said, well, I'm running out of stone. What I do see is that we are dealing with a position of breakthrough or breakdown. It is what we talk about in chaos theory, actually, as you know, a point of divergence. The edge of chaos is where suddenly you either jump to another level of complexity and reorganize society in a different way, or you break down into a regression into more primitive lifestyles. I believe 2012 is that. The world is aging. When we had the idea of retirement at 65 under Bismarck in Germany in the 19th century, the life expectancy was 48. So you could actually have a pension program at 65 because there were going to be 2% of the population ever getting there. Okay? We've kept that principle, but we've managed to have population getting older. So what happens is that as you have more and more percentage of people that are requiring a lot more help, there are only two solutions in a monopoly of conventional money, right? One of them is, let's call it the Germanic or the Scandinavian one, a promise is a promise. Let's go bankrupt, okay? Because you're going to have to, you know, when at a certain point, they won't be payable, right? The Anglo-Saxon solution, America and England, is we have a pie of a certain size, and there are more and more people who need to eat from it. So let's cut the slices smaller and smaller. And maybe that way they'll die quicker anyway, so it's one way of solving the problem.